Hello everyone. So recently I've reached 5,000 hours of usage on Oberon, which I'll show you a bit here. You can do the math if you want. Just add these together and then multiply with my hours and uh, yeah, you'll see that's over 5,000 hours. So what I want to do is I want to showcase all of my Oberons. So let's see, not this loadout yet. Alright, so uh, let's start with my first one right here, which is one of my full Umbro Oberons. I call this one Aerith. Um, so I have this build which I use on Deimos, uh, particularly for the endless Deimos missions. This I obviously use on Orbivalis. Um, oops. And then there's this build which I use on Plains of Eidolon. And then this build I use to kill Technocyte Codas, for the final confrontation. I'll show you some of the loadouts I use for that. There's some of the loadouts I use that on. Not all of them, but I'll show a couple. Like my Solaris loadout. So I have Arcane Avenger to help boost my damage up, along with Sector Electa for those objectives where you have to collect credits. And then my main source of damage is Dual Coda Toxica. It might seem a little redundant to have Secondary Enervate along with Arcane Avenger, but Avenger is mostly to boost up my Sector Electa and Comorex, even though my main weapon is dual Coda Toxica. Oops. And then I'll show the Plains build, wherever that is. There we go. So you can see I have Zada's Whisperers along with Spine Fusion with a very high amount of strength. So that just makes my Exceltra Prime kill things really efficiently. So I kind of just spam that for, the whole bounty. I keep exiting the arsenal. Let's go back to this loadout so I can show my next Oberon, which is another full Umbro Oberon, but the shards are pretty different here. So I have armor, health, and then corrosive stacks. This one I don't use as much. Like this used to be my full support build, but I'll be showing my new full support build later. I do use this build right here, Archon Slayer, which is here. I'll show the loadout. So again, very high strength. Well, not that high, but pretty high strength with Zala's Whisper and Spine Fusion. Uh, that powers up either my Lonka or my dual Toxis to be able to kill an Archon very quickly. Going back here, I do have this build, which I don't use a whole lot. I don't have a loadout for it, but it's my Blinding Reef build. I'll usually use it with here. With this Prisma Lens build. Which one is it? I think it's this one I normally use it with. Yeah, because I know I use it with Viral. So I use it with this Prisma Lens build. So like I'll shoot and then I'll reave through the enemies and that just basically usually outright kills them. So that's pretty cool. Oh, one last build I want to show here, which is my Ultra build. So if I need to be like extremely tanky, well, I have tankier builds in this, but if I want to, if I want to be extremely tanky without using arrow set mods, this is what I use. So I'll normally use this with like a dual Toxicist or something, and uh, it it can tank a lot. Um, it's very low effort on my part to use it, and it takes a surprising amount, and that was even before the Oberon rework. I haven't stress tested since then, but when I stress tested before, it lasted like 2 hours in arbitration, so uh, it's pretty overkill. Um, I have another sort of overkill build, which I'll show a bit later. Actually, I think it's on this Oberon too. My Ice Lord build. Let me just make sure it's the same one because I have builds of the same name on a few of my different Oberons because like I move the builds around sometimes. Okay, no, my Ice Lord build is on a different. My current Ice Lord build is on a different Oberon, which I'll show a bit later. Uh, but yeah, pretty overkill amounts of tanking. Let's move on to this Oberon, which is one of my melee Oberons. So just two crit damage shards. I think I have three different melee Oberons. So two crit damage shards, two for casting speed, and then one for effectiveness on energy orbs. I use energy orb shards a lot because uh, sometimes they're all that's needed to solve energy economy. Uh, just one orb, just one shard. I mean, if I need to use more, I would probably rather use something uh, like max efficiency or whatever, depending on what the build needs. Uh, but yeah, this one is Reaper. This is my weird size build. I don't use this one a whole lot. This is Vindicator. I really like this one. It basically uses Spider Fusion um, alongside a is it Sanctity Magistar? I can't remember. I think it's actually I have a particular infusion built on one of these hammers, which I think is cool with Shield Deck actually. Yeah, so as you can see, um, no elemental mods on here because I get all my elemental damage from Spine Fusion, and then I just remove armor with pillage, and it deals some pretty big damage. Let's see what else I have on here. Oh, Albacore Demon. This is one of my best builds. I'll show. Oops. I'll show the build for that. I mean, the loadout for that. So basically, the whole idea is I alternate between using Rada and Wrathful Dance to heavy attack with Keratinos. A lot of the Loadout is made for doing that combo as quickly as possible. So you can see I have Arcane Strike. I have a lot of what do you call it? Strength for Wrathful Advance. A decent amount of range for armor removal in case I need it, which is very rare. Synth ref well, I have multiple synth set mods, so I can auto reload Rada, so I don't need to spend time manually reloading it. I even have reinforced bond on my MOA, so I can uh, shooting fast, having higher fire rate lowers the delay between being able to use being between shooting with Rada and being able to use Wrathful Advance. So having a bunch of fire rate is really helpful. And yeah, this build basically combines speed and power. So it's pretty much my go-to for like any new content or anything. I'll either use this or like one of my full Umbral builds when like new content comes out while I figure out how to best approach it. So yeah, I'd say this is one of my best builds. A very strong go-to. Um, let's go back to this. Oh yes, we have Thunderlord and Warlord. Let's show Warlord first. Not a whole lot to say about this. I use Ack and Brunt. Uh, Akron what do you call it? It's axes. Uh, they inflict self stagger, so I actually put Prime Short-Footed on this build so that I can go up to enemies hitting them with the projectiles and the melee hit at the same time. So that deals a lot of damage, and I boost that up a bunch with Arcane Strike, with Warcry, and I use melee exposure for damage, and so yeah, a lot of big damage from this build. Uh, and this is kind of cool. Energizing Shot works on Sonic Core's AoE. So if I need extra energy, I can just shoot towards some energy orbs, and that'll refill it with more than twice the efficiency. So pretty nice for energy economy, especially with my projectile speed driven. So yeah, and what was the other one I was gonna show? Oh yeah, Lord of Thunder. So this is my electricity elemental ward build. Um, so the way it works is that, I use an ability like Reckoning to remove armor or whatever, and then that gives me just a little bit of shields back because of Augur Reach. Now, since I have a little bit of shields, that allows me to restore shields with Rock the Dark Dagger because Rock the Dark Dagger's passive doesn't work if you don't have any shields. So I restore a little bit, and then I'll hit enemies that are radiated to basically restore it to max. And so, yeah, and so the high strength helps with that shield getting duration. You can't really see the duration here because the shields just come from the ability. Um, but yeah, it's a really easy build to use, and if I need the extra safety barrier, I always have Phoenix Renewal ready to be used. So yeah, that works really well. All right. Um, let's go back here. I'm gonna try to do this a bit more quickly because 15 Oberons is a lot to go through. All right, so this is my basic Oberon, and I call it basic because it just uses a bunch of casting speed plus one strength shard. And I also put my sort of basic template builds here. So the whole point of these builds is that you can copy them. You put your helmet of choice on, and you can modify the build as you see fit. So this, for example, is my basic renewal build. On this build, you would want to replace Smite, and overall, you're very tanky and stuff. Uh, so yeah, just you're just very hard to kill, and you give all that armor and stuff to allies. So it's a good support as well. Uh, let's look at my basic Reckoning build. Sort of the same thing. It's another sort of template build. On this build, you'd also replace Smite. It's not as focused on being tanky, but uh, you get good armor removal and stuff. So, um, good armor removal and good crowd control. So, yeah, uh, it works well. And obviously, as I said, you modify it as you see fit. Basic Smite is a bit different. In this case, you'd want to replace Reckoning. So you have, uh, I mean, you can replace Hallowed Ground if you want. You do have that sort of freedom with these builds, but the way it's originally made, you'd want to replace Reckoning, and you basically focus on dealing good damage with Smite, as well as healing yourself and allies with Moat Reconstruct, which is also why I have Hunter Adrenaline on here. So like as you take damage, you can just spam Smite for both damage and team wide healing. Uh, I also have Scarcross here. This is my interception build. So I have Ice Wave Impedance with a whole lot of range and duration. Also speed, so I can get to interception points more quickly. I'll show the loadout, but basically everything you know I've explained here. Um, and yeah, this is my chaperone build. Well, I'll explain it here too. Um, this is basically like my full support build. Actually, I'll show the loadout. I might as well. Where is it? Here we go. Oh yeah, that was the old version of the chaperone build. I have my new version on a different Oberon. So I'll actually talk about this a bit later. Like I said, I sometimes move my builds to different Oberons because I think they'll fit different shard setups better. So I sort of have copies of different builds in different places. Sometimes with other differences between them because then I edit them at different points. So yeah. All right, so this is my ability damage Oberon. So if we look here, this is my main smite damage build. If you have, if I remember correctly, 302% power strength with roar. Smite basically one shots everything in AoE. So as long as they don't have armor, you just cast smite and cast smite on the strongest enemy in the group, and then all of them will die. All of them within range, at least. Not much else to say about this one. It's just big smite damage. You don't need a prime or anything. If you do prime, I think you can get away with like 100% power strength, something around there. But I think it's a whole lot more efficient to just not need a primer. And so this is what I go with when I want ability damage. I'll also show Volca here. So this is my Howled Eruption build. So this is what I use for really low level missions. If Howled Eruption's damage is sufficient, I'll just use it. Because my other like AoE clearing build is this Howled Reckoning build, which I'll talk about a bit later. And because Howled Reckoning is line of sight, it's good to have something that isn't line of sight for room clearing. So that's that. Okay, I guess we're talking about the Howled Reckoning build now. This is the old version of the Howled Eruption build. Starburst here. This is my Breach Surge build. It used to work a lot better back when Vigorous Swap affected Smite, because this would buff Smite. Smite would hit the targets that are affected by Breach Surge, and then Breach Surge would then be buffed by this again, so it'd be a sort of double dipping of that effect. But it works really well as it is right now too. I don't think Breach Surge needs much of an introduction. You're just combining Breach Surge and Smite to deal some big damage. We have Annihilator here. Like I said, this is for like room clearing. Use Howled Eruption, a decent amount of strength, and high range. I also have a lot of speed on this build, so I can get through missions quickly. Battery Bomber, uh, Tesla Bank build. So I usually use this with a Path Assist to what do you call it? To just make this deal a bunch of damage. And then these two are outdated builds. I'm not going to show those. Let's go here. And then we have Gladiator. I call this one Gladiator because the build that I made for it is a gladiator set build. I think I actually have two gladiator set builds on this. Yeah. So this one is full counter. It's a Nourish build with mecha set. Here, I'll actually show the other loadout I have for it. So I usually use this wolf sledge with it. This buff with fire just deals a whole lot of damage in AoE because of melee influence, electricity, and blast. Um, the Sonic Core, kind of like on my um, Warlord loadout, helps with energy economy in case I need it. And then Basma I use for healing because this build has a lot of health. Uh, not so much on healing per second, so having something that helps with healing is really helpful. Animus Beast. Uh, this is what I use for melee animosity builds mainly. So I can like spam Flower Rush and stuff. Gladiator Savage. This is a build I used during the the Ascension event. I can't remember what that event was called, but that event. King of Deimos. I have this Cambrion Slayer loadout here. So um, yeah, has pretty high range, full armor removal because of Precision Intensify. Um, and yeah, I basically just group things, and like they get destroyed by this Gas Kuva Shield Egg. Let's see, I also have my two of my, what do you call it? Uh, Kuva Survival builds here. So this is Dreamer, my lull build, with Endless Lullaby. So basically, this is how I keep the Kuva Harvester protected. Uh, I don't have full armor removal, but I have a decent amount of armor removal. It's enough anyway, especially with uh, my Wolf Sledge. Um, yeah, not much else to say about this build. I think I think it's pretty cool to have a use for lull to defend the Kuva Harvesters. And then my other one, my more preferred Kuva Survival build is uh, is this one. So this one does have full armor removal once you get augments stacked up. Has a pretty high strength gloom, so slows most enemies. And then I use this Thalys. Um, yeah, it's a Thalys build. And yeah, for both builds, they're melee based, and as you can see, this Oberon is full of crit damage shards, so very powerful. All right, let's go back to this loadout because I do not like editing. Like I like having my loadouts uh, be ready to use without having to edit them. So that's actually why I bought this new loadout to start editing it and make this video with. What is this? Okay, this is my speed Oberon. So this one I use for rescue and defection. Very high speed, and the rest of the stuff really doesn't matter on it. I just put on like duration and stuff. I did put on Viral Rush, so like when I parkour, I can sort of like use Viral Rush to like change my momentum. So I think that's pretty cool. And Phoenix Mule is there just because I'm basically glass canning it. So if I'm doing like Steel Path or whatever, that helps a bit. High duration um, is mainly for Viral Rush because Yeah, that's affected by duration. And then I have captain here. Let me actually show the. Actually, wait, is this the right loadout? Okay, no, this is my old Railjack loadout, so never mind that. Stealth here, this is what I use for spy. So again, I have very high speed, and then I have high range and a pretty decent amount of duration for quiver here, so I can get through spy missions with that. All right, this is my I think the third melee Oberon I'm showing here. So this should be my last one. So basically the same as the one with two crit damage shards, except I replaced the energy max shard with another crit damage shard, so uh, I get more damage. Uh, let's see. I believe that might have a different. I have a different shard setup on my current Predator build, wherever it is. I can't find it right now. Um, let's see. This is probably the most noteworthy build I have on here, which is my level melee build. So whenever I want to level a melee weapon, I go onto this loadout. I'll I'll mod my melee weapon with a very basic build. Even if I don't have like, usually I won't even have a catalyst on it. So like I'll just put on Weeping Wounds. Usually I'll try to fit on Weeping Wounds, Blood Rush, and Berserker Fury. Um, and then the shards take care of the crit damage, and I also have Roar to really boost the damage up. Wait, oops, wrong thing. I also have Roar to really boost the damage up, and that's basically that. Uh, yeah, let's go back here. Yeah, usually, just to explain, usually when I want to do something, I just select the loadout for it. In terms of like, I build placing all my Oberons, I'm a little bit lost with those sometimes, which is part of why I like to just have loadouts fully set up, so I don't need to like edit them or anything. With one exception, which I'll talk about later. Let's see what this one is. Strength, health, and armor. Oh yeah, this is actually the one exception that I was mentioning. So if I go over to leveled guns, uh, this is the one loadout where I actually do like to scroll between builds. So this one, if I'm mainly using a primary to level, this is what I'll use. And if I'm mainly using a secondary to level, this is what I'll use. Overall, it's a tanky build. I got some armor removal from Oath and Demise, Smite Infusion to boost up damage, and that's about it. Of course, I have Arcane Avenger and Combat Discipline, so my guns get a lot of damage from this. So, whenever I want to level one of them, I'll do that again with some sort of basic build. I'll usually put on like status mods first and then multi-shot. And I think that's all I usually put on. It really depends on the innate polarities, of course, but that's usually what I try to go for. So yeah, that's my gun leveling setup. Um, what's next? Okay, this is my primary electricity damage shards, plus some strength. So I use this one on two of my loadouts. So if we go into training, this is actually what I use to like sort of practice aim training for Conclave. So like I'll go on to a mission like mod or whatever, And, I'll try to just, parkour around trying to get as many headshots with my Dare Vandal as possible. No, what do you call it? No, projectile flight speed buff, so I can, work with the base flight speed. Not that, flight speed matters a whole lot with, most enemies in Warframe, but uh, it's about, getting a good feel for it. And then the other one is Flame Lord, I think. No? It must have been my old Flame Lord build. So never mind that. Uh, okay, so now we have this is Grand Eternalist. This is it's a pretty high range Gloom build. Not a whole lot to say about it. I normally use this with Parry Gale. I mean, I can show the loadout for it. I know it uses with a Parry Gale, so this is my main source of damage. If enemies are really grouped up, I'll use this to blast them away. And then Tails Boltace is for like speed and stuff. Although it does some pretty good damage too. Um, Now there's also, where is it? It's my old Kuva farming build. There we go, Power Eternalist. So I'll bring this to Kuva farming occasionally, but I do prefer the other two builds a bit. So it's another Gloom build, less range, but pretty high strength to go with Spine Fusion, and pretty much the same loadout, just besides Acarius Prime, I have this. Uh, doesn't make a whole lot of a difference, but yeah. I like this for Kuva farming because you don't because basically with a sniper I don't want too much range because I'm not moving around as much. So uh, I use just enough range to really just keep the extractor to keep the harvester safe, and then that's that. Uh, Disruptor. I don't use what's it called, Magus Lockdown. So for disruption, I use Condemn. I have high strength and high shields with it, so um, this is very good for shield gating. Uh, let's see, I also have this build, which is what I use for arbitrations. Arbitrations, and I also use it for Sanctum and Atomica bounties. So it's just very high strength with precision intensify for Roar. I have some good range too, so I can share this really high strength buff with my teammates. And that's basically that. You don't have to worry about these other two builds. Oops, I edited one of my loadouts. Let's go back here. Almost done. This is the one I use for Flame Lord. So Flame Lord is my Heat Element Ward build. So I have good strength for the health buff as well as decent amount of armor buffing. Spine Fusion to boost damage. I'll actually show the lead I use for this. I use a Tenet Galaxion with Photon Overcharge. So I get a bunch of energy even when I'm not like actively taking damage. Well, yeah, I get a lot of energy. I used to have Hunter Adrenaline on this build, but I replaced it with health conversion. So I rely on Photon Overcharge for, well, partly for for energy. I mean, I do also have Universal Fallout, but the range isn't particularly high, so Photon Overcharge helps a lot. Uh, and then I have Chaperone. So this is my full support Oberon. So I have some pretty high strength with Bright Bonnet. So I'm giving my teammates a bunch of what do you call it? A bunch of strength and energy. I do have a good range for arm removal. Universal Fallout handles my energy economy, and it's overall just very strong. Uh, I love this weapon combo, by the way. So Settle Prime is my main weapon, but whenever I need to, like, whenever there's a group of enemies, I just blast them with this Prisma Angstrom, which is really strong because I was able to. I have secondary surge on here. I have tainted clip, and I have a bunch of crit on it. So no elemental damage. All that is handled by my spine fusion. Uh, so so that's so yeah, that buffs it up a bunch and it deals some really good damage. Um, let's see, almost done here. Uh, what am I doing? Oh yeah, let's go back to this loadout. And let's see, this one I don't use a whole lot. This one I have like duration shards and duration health and armor. Are there any builds on here that I actually use? Yes, there's this one. This is my captain build. So let's go to captain. So this is my build that I use for railjack. So very high duration with dispensary. So that's good for supporting my teammates. So usually I don't like to pilot, but if I am piloting, I can just obviously use dispensary and have my energy topped off. But generally, I'll place this next to the pilot because oftentimes the pilot doesn't have dispensary. I'll place it next to the pilot, and then I'll cast a Swine Infusion and then go into my Arcwing. And the cool thing about Swine Infusion is that the buff carries on over into Arcwing, so my Arc Gun will actually buff with a bunch of radiation damage. I also have Arcane Avenger, which can trigger while I'm in Arcwing, and Arcane Blessing. Uh, Triggering that is helped by having dispensary, and that carries over into Arcwing as well. So I can have a very tanky Arcwing with a whole lot of arc gun damage. Uh, so so that's really strong. That's the only uh, build I really use on that Oberon. And then let's look here. Oh yes, this is my uh, the only build I use. Yeah, I don't use this build. The only build on this I use is Venom Lord, which is pretty cool. I kind of have to show the layout for that. Uh, yeah, so basically, if you didn't know, this status chance on Toxin Elemental Ward, that's scaling toxin damage, uh, which is only like 5% per tick, if I remember correctly. But what you can do with it is you can buff it up a bunch with toxin damage shards, and then you can use melee afflictions to then multiply those toxin procs because you can only get one toxin proc at a time, usually from the toxin elemental ward. But this just multiplies them. So what I'll do is I'll pull enemies in. They'll all get that toxin proc, and then when I do the second Tails Bolte slide, it's going to inflict them with lifted, and then it's going to multiply all the toxin procs on them. and then basically kill anything with scaling damage. Uh, so yeah, that's all my owns. I think I missed my Ice Lord Oberon. Um, so I'll talk about this build quickly. This build is basically like really overkill for tanking. I tested this like about an hour on Mott. I basically played on Mott for an hour. I stood still after about an hour just to see if it could still face tank, and this build was able to. And the cool thing about it is that however tanky I am, my teammates will be even more tanky because they get the same healing and the same armor buff from renewal, but I also have everlasting ward, so they can get an extra armor buff directly from that. So yeah, very strong, very overkill in terms of tanking. Um, so yeah, that's pretty cool. Any other builds I want to talk about that I missed here? They're my Cascade builds. So, well, I talked about this one already. I just didn't mention it being my Cascade build. This is my Roar Oberon. You know, the one that I said, you know, if you have 302% power strength or more, you can one-shot enemies with Smite. And then there's my other Cascade build, which uses Firewalker on one of my melee Oberons. So nothing too special about it. I just have a bunch of speed, and yeah, I deal good damage with my melee weapon. I think that's all I want to talk about. Um, so yeah, I have a lot of Oberon builds, as you can see. Not every slot is in use, but you know, quite a bit of them are in use, and basically each one has a purpose, even if it's just for one build. Some of them had more purpose before, but you know, they just became outdated with the rework. So yeah, 5,000 hours with Oberon. One thing I wanted to mention is that you know I'm so used to like, as you might notice with a lot of my builds, my only survivability is Phoenix Renewal. Um, on this one, I'm mainly using Ration Negation, but um, most of my survivability comes from Phoenix Renewal, like you can see on this build, for example, or on my Arbitration build, for example. I'm so used to that, and now that we have Righteous Negation, it's just so easy to play him now. I'm used to putting in effort to survive, basically. And you know, now I just don't need that anymore, especially with like how tanky he can be as well. Uh, so I have mixed feelings about that. You know, it's cool to be more powerful, but like I don't know. I like putting in effort to survive. So uh, that's why I have Equinox loadouts now. Equinox is kind of like my secondary frame now because she does take effort to survive. Uh, I was thinking about becoming an Equinox main, but it, I'm just so used to Oberon. It's hard to let go of that basically. Um, but yeah, Equinox is definitely my secondary frame. I didn't have a secondary frame before, but now I do have one. So yeah, that's all my Oberons. So like I said, hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you all later.